I'm so excited to chat with Heather Robinson today on the Awaken Feminine podcast. Heather is the Divine Mother Mentor. She's a guide for conscious reparenting, inner child and mother wound healing, and she's also a best-selling author. She helps people evolve beyond the BS family patterns and cycles, holding them back from their goals by harnessing the mother archetype to reparent themselves. Her mission is to empower parents, women, and men to prioritize themselves, heal deeply rooted wounds, and to receive the unconditional love they're searching for. And I know she has so much love and wisdom to share with us today. She's joining me all the way from Northern Virginia in the USA. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited for our conversation. I don't know what we're going to dive into exactly. We're just going with the flow, but I keep getting mother wounds, so we'll see how that all plays out as we chat. So, Heather, before we dive in, I would love for you to share with us, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
The awakened feminine, I think, is somebody who is really conscious and aware of all of the things that encompass the feminine. And this doesn't even have to be necessarily a woman, right? It's just that awakened feminine is, you're aware of the shadows, you're aware of the woundings of that part of you, and you're aware of the power, and you're embodying that, and you're sharing that with the world. And also just in balance with the masculine and the awakened masculine, the same thing. I think me coming from the world of the mother is all about balance, and it does encompass both masculine and feminine. So for me, it's very much that awareness of the duality of both, the balance of both, how they work together so beautifully and in harmony.
Thank you. That's a beautiful definition. I've got the tingles going, so that's always like, oh, that's awesome. Now, Heather, I really would love for you to share a bit more about who you are and what you do and why you do what you do, because, I gave a little bit of intro, but I really love for our listeners or, people watching to really get to know you more.
I came to this work. I've been working with the mother for my entire life, really, in various capacities, some more obvious than others, but I have always been connected to this portal, this channel. And, it started more obviously with birth and mothers becoming mothers, but it really has delved into this realm of the shadow, this realm of wounding, this realm of trauma, and how the mother is really just there to hold you through that. And it has, that energy has the key to healing those traumas. So at least for me, like, that's the channel that worked for me, and I know is really, really profound for many, many people out there. So for me, I came to this out of my own experience, out of my own woundings, out of just, I know that that's my purpose, because that was something that was really obvious, really impactful, really transformative in my world. I became, these wounds followed me my whole life, and I was actually very conscious and aware of a lot of them, but I became a single mom around my Saturn return, and it was just this really chaotic, horrible experience that forced me to look at how I was living my life and the decisions that I was making, the choices that I was making, the patterns that I was constantly finding myself in and reliving, and do something different, because I didn't want my son to have the same experience. I didn't want to have to raise him the way that I was raised. I didn't want to be forced into those same decisions and the same trajectory. So I really delved into healing on all levels. And I was already in it, very much in it, from like birth trauma and PTSD from his dad and all of these really crappy experiences around that time. But when I kind of came out of that, I was then forced to take my ex to court in order to protect my son. He had he threatened a lot of things. It was crazy. But, without going into details about all of that, it was just, I had to do something that I didn't really want to do. And I had to heal myself in order to be able to do that. I had to really be able to stand in front of him and listen to somebody saying all sorts of crazy stuff about me. Right. And I had to prepare for that. And in that process, I found like so many things and I healed so many parts of me. And I found the truly the divine mother and reconnected to God and was able to really hold myself in a way that I really had no clue even like existed before. So for me, that all of my patterns, all of my wounds culminated in this like really not fun process and experience that forced me to take a harder look at my life and myself and what I was doing with it and to really turn everything around for my son. And for me, that was through the mother, that was through the divine mother, that was through reconnecting with God, healing mother wounds, healing inner child trauma, attachment wounds. I mean, so much of this stuff like bubbled up to the surface once you open the door to take a look. It's like, wow, okay. That's a lot,
Yeah, sometimes I look back and like, maybe I should have just left the door closed because life would seem so much easier.
Yeah, what would it have been like if I just did not open that door? And really for me, it's like, well, I think the cycle would have just been on my son. I would have just passed everything on to him. I would have done everything unconsciously the same way it was done for me, and projecting these wounds onto him, and then he would have to process them rather than me. And so for me to do it, I'm called to do it because I am doing it and I was aware of them. So, just taking responsibility for that and doing it in a different way so that he can do whatever he's supposed to do, which is like 3 steps beyond whatever I'm here to do. So, holding that space for him to really reach his full potential and purpose.
Yeah, I love that. So beautiful. I'm a mum myself as well, as you know, and it's just like you're saying, doing this work so that our children don't have to go through the same things that we had to go through. That's what makes me want to do this work and open all the doors and work through everything. So it's beautiful what you're doing. Can you please explain to our listeners who don't know what mother wounds are or inner child healing is, can you give us a bit of a definition or explanation of what it actually is?
Yeah, for sure. So the way I like to describe this is, if you guys know what shadow work is is looking at those parts of yourself that you kind of stuff away or shove in the closet and try to hide or minimize because they didn't benefit you in some way at some point. And so shadows are kind of this like umbrella level of the healing work. On the layer lower than that is inner child work. So you can have a lot of shadows from all sorts of experiences in your life, but inner child is that specific time in your life. And there's lots of shadows that are involved with that and wounds that are involved with that. But that will be about, 0 to like 7 or 9 is kind of the first round of the inner child. And then it kind of repeats throughout the teenage years. So it's kind of a two version thing. One tends to be a little bit more unconscious because a lot of people don't have as many memories from the first phase, and then it repeats in the teens where we are a lot more aware of everything. And then a stage low, like deeper than that and more specific than that, is the mother wound or the father wound. And these wounds are very specific inner child wounds and cause shadows. So that's why they're kind of under this big umbrella. They're very specific. The mother wound is born of basically the patriarchy and how that kind of impacted women and their journeys through motherhood, and how their woundings, their experiences, the ways that they were frustrated, the ways that they were not taken care of, the ways that they were expected to be. All of these things can cause a lot of turmoil for parents, for mothers. And sometimes that's displaced and projected onto their children when they don't handle it properly or process it themselves. It gets projected and passed along. And so you can imagine a woman who maybe had to give up her career to have kids and then is frustrated because of X, Y, and Z. And these kids then are taking on this, it's my fault, mom's upset. And so it starts this whole cycle with the mother. It gets passed down. The same thing with the father, just because and I don't know how much that's related to the patriarchy as it just is, we're impacted by our parents. You call it the mother wound or the father wound because of whoever gave it to you. But really, I'm looking at the inner child, and a lot of those wounds do come from our parents and grandparents and friends. And, there's a lot more to it, but the mother and the father are so foundational to our development. They're so important and vital when you're looking at how you function in the world, how you see yourself in the world, your place in it, your purpose, your value, your worth, and they model they are the number one model for how you are relating with other people, how your relationships go, how you, your relationship to money, your relationship to other people, your relationship just to your existence in the world. It's modeled off of that. And if you weren't given the unconditional love that every human deserves as a birthright, then there's this nervous system response for survival because you rely on your parents that then there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. I'm wrong, bad, broken, not worthy, unlovable, whatever sort of thing you made sense of it. However, your child brain made sense of that experience is the limiting belief that was written from that experience, even though it's not true. But then we repeat, we call that true. We live our lives accordingly, and we repeat these patterns over and over again until we realize, wow, actually, I am totally lovable, and they just had their stuff going on, and because they're human, and I just misunderstood the situation completely, and I made it mean something about me that's not true. And now I'm going to heal that and move forward accordingly, that I am totally loved. and yeah, that doesn't need to hold me back anymore. That doesn't need to be on repeat in my life anymore. So that's just one example, but that kind of is the gist of how that can form, what it is, how it forms, what it can look like, and how it really can perpetuate throughout our lives in a really profound way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I love that you brought up money because I was going to say, because I do that. I don't specifically, look at all mother wounds because I teach people how to trade and, money mindset, but we do heal that mother and father wound, ancestral wounds around money. And it's so important that we do the work so that it doesn't get passed and recognize that. And what I find, can you talk about a bit about this? Because this just came up, like the different layers. So I've been working through a lot of mother wound stuff myself lately. And it's funny because I thought I had cleared some, all of it, inverted commas. And then something else comes up and I was like, oh, I thought I cleared that. But it's like another layer has come up. Do you mind talking a bit about how that works with you clear something and then something else comes up and you're like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah. Yeah, it can be really frustrating. Absolutely. The process of healing is so not linear and it's not a one-time job. So there's definitely this realm of there's two ways to think about it and to look at it and know that there's gray area, but just for a foundation, I'll describe it in one way and then another way. The first way is that when you're doing inner child work and healing these deep traumas, you have to go to the actual root, the first time you ever felt that way, the first time that it ever happened to you. The very first time is when that pattern was implanted. And without going to that first time, it's really hard to understand how this like repeats. All you're going to do is find a million different ways that it repeated it throughout your life. And it's not actually going to clear any of it. And you're going to be stuck in this healing circle for eternity. But if you find the root, it clears all of everything that happened after that. It clears all of those patterns. You're like, oh, wow, this makes sense. I get it now. And you heal it. And then it's quote unquote done. However, when you look at it the other way, that you are regardless are going to have to come back to something over and over again, that doesn't mean that it's not healed. Like you're never going to get to a place that you're totally healed. You're never going to get to a place that like, oh, I'm perfect. That's, enlightenment, and you no longer have a place here on earth. Like you're going to move on. But the process is that where when you do the first layer of healing, that's going to be the hard part. That's the part that everybody resists. That's the part everybody's afraid of. That's the part that everybody runs from. And when you stop using coping mechanisms and bypassing and all of these things to avoid it, and you actually go through that first layer, you never have to do that again. You never have to do that again. It's going to come up in a different way. It's going to come up in different aspects of your life. It's going to come up and in, like a deeper layer where you're like, oh, I thought I did that. Well, yeah, you did. And here it is again. Every time you up level, you're going to experience that. It's going to come up because these were the seeds that we were grown with. Like we were raised and these were implanted. And then we lived however many years until we figured it out with that being part of us. So it's not going to be like, oh, I found it and now I cleared it and now I'm done. And I'm totally guilty of this. And it's so hard and frustrating where you're like, gosh, I thought I was done with that. Like, where's everything that I dream of? But it's just this, it's really an unfolding, and you're going to spiral back around. Healing is a spiral. You're going to come back around. You're going to see, wow, there's this aspect of it that I didn't do last time, or I didn't really connect it to this other thing. It's in relation to money in that realm, and these deeper layers are just an unfolding of the healing, not like, oh, I got to do it all over again. It's never going to be like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And, just from my experience, and I'm sure yours as well, the first time is the hardest. And then as things come up, you're like, oh, right, okay, let's clear that. Is a lot easier, even though it is frustrating. It's not like the first time where you're like, what just happened?
Yeah. And also too, it's easier because now you know how to do it. You know what the process looks like. You know what the root is, hopefully. And when you know the root, you know the tools, you know the process, you know what it feels like to kind of be cleared of something, you just kind of go through it again real quick. And basically what that looks like is sending love to that little version of you where that root was, you're just sending love. You're like, okay, this is what it is. This is where it's at. This is what's happening. I just need some love right now. I can do this. Totally worthy of this next level. Totally, able and have the capabilities and the capacity and all these things for this next level, and really just infusing it all with love that is a reminder that you're worthy, because it's not actually like a default setting, because that's not how we were programmed with these seeds of wounds. So it's so much easier when you're going through it again and again in various ways. But there is definitely that aspect of, as long as you get to the root, you never have to go searching for it again.
I want to ask you, when you were talking about the inner child, there's the first phase where it's like 0 to 7, 9-ish, and then the next phase. And then we talked about getting to the root. So when was the first time? So for people that are like, well, I don't know when it was, I was like maybe 2. How would people find that root?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. That's a great question. Because so many people come to me and say, I have no memories of my childhood. I have no memories of anything. And even in sessions where we're doing these deep healing sessions where we're literally diving in and going into the inner child, if they don't really allow themselves to go into it, they're or we aren't connected to the emotion of it, then they're stuck with their first memory, conscious memory. And that's not going to always be the first time. So if you're remembering a time, when you are a teenager, it might not be the first time. It probably isn't the first time. It's just probably the first time you experience that with like your peers, right? So like the first time you experience it is with your family, and then you repeat it again in your teens with peers. And that tends to be a more conscious phase in life. But what you do when you're doing this work is you have to access the emotion of it. You have to access the feeling in your body that it feels like to be in that state where that wound is being triggered. And when you are in that emotion, so you ever find yourself kind of breaking down, losing it, crying, screaming, whatever, you just ask yourself, when is the first time I ever felt this way? When is the first time I ever felt this way? And allow it to come up. Your emotional body does not work with your consciousness. You're not looking through your memories. You're not going through the filing cabinet of memories. You're going into your emotional body. When you're in that emotional state and you say, when's the first time you felt this way? Your emotions are going to tell you, and you follow the emotions. You might not have a conscious memory. You might just be putting pieces together of how things were and things that you were told that happened. And then that gives you the context for the emotion. But I mean, when you're looking at, let's say, the root chakra and blocks in the root chakra, those tend to happen in the first 2 years of life. So those fears and the stability of survival and, that everything else is built upon, it's the foundation, happens in utero, during birth, and in early infancy. So you're not going to have a conscious memory of that at all. And this is where it's really fun to access, really start to learn to trust your intuition and what your intuition tells you. And access dreams. A lot of people can see things and where you can't really get the context of everything and really understand it, maybe in a session where you're trying to trace that emotion, you'd be able to then, a lot of people will have dreams about it, and then you can access more information that way. But it's not based on conscious memory at all. So you have to kind of like take that out and use your context of what memories you do have, use your context of the stories that you have heard and were told of your early childhood, and kind of use that as your baseline, and just follow and trust the emotions. So it's a really great practice in trusting yourself and intuition, as well as, letting go of the idea that everything has to be perfect and proven. And I remember so crystal clearly that this is what it's not going to be like that.
Yes, definitely. And it's like when you say follow the emotions, like for me, when I do this kind of work with my clients, it's like, okay, what's the age? Just doesn't matter. Don't get in your head. Is like so important not to get in your head about that, because we always want things to be right.
Right.
Yeah. So
and that's part of like, I want to be totally healed and get it cleared and be done with it. And I'm healed and I'm done. I don't have to do this anymore. And also, like, when you have that mindset, you're also approaching the healing process with that. Like, I got to get it right so that I can be healed and be done with it. And it's just, you have to really let all of that go. And just, this is where you can really access the feminine, where you're just in your intuition, you're in your trust, you're in the flow, you're following the emotions. Like, all of this is very much that feminine side of things. And you have to let that masculine just like sit for a minute. Like, just let me go here. You don't have to protect me. You don't have to block anything. You don't have to, stand ground in terms of like just filtering what passes and what's allowed to come up. There's a really beautiful, I believe there's a really beautiful mechanism in our brain, partially the ego, that will not allow you to go anywhere or see anything or feel anything that you're not ready for. Especially if you are really grounded into protective energy like the Divine Mother, you're just not going to. And so sometimes if you are only getting back to like a teenage year and you're not getting to that first memory, just know that that's okay. That's where you're at right now. Full, complete acceptance that that's that's as far back as you're going to go right now. And it doesn't have to be right. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be like, it is an unfolding, and you'll get there when you're supposed to get there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And yeah, thank you so much for the reminder for everyone that's listening, watching, that, just to let go of expectations and just fully accept what is, because like you said, we're meant to heal and do all the things in divine timing. So whilst we want to have everything done yesterday and healed yesterday or last year or the year before, it doesn't work that way. So yeah, thank you for that reminder. That's really beautiful. Now I want to jump into reparenting yourself, because that's, you do the inner child healing, you do the mother wound healing, or all the healings, all the wound healings. And then I know you also guide people to reparent themselves. What do you mean by that? Can you give our audience explanation?
Yeah, absolutely. So reparenting yourself is really taking on the role of the parent for your inner child now. And you can't be you can't go back in time. You can't change how things were, but you can heal that part of you now, because that part of you is still there, still wounded, still needing love. And just like you have an inner child, you also have an inner mother or father or parent. Like there's just this inner caregiver. We can call it that. I call it the inner mother, but you can call it what resonates for you. But there's a part of you that's really taking care of you and taking care of your inner child. And if that part of you is modeled after your parents, your mom, your dad, your grandma, whoever was taking care of you, then that part of you also holds those shadows and those woundings that wounded your inner child. And you cannot reparent yourself with that. You can't. Humans are flawed. Humans are wounded. Humans are not perfect, right? But God is, the divine mother is. And so if you kind of take that inner caregiver or that inner mother that's treating yourself the same way, like you learned how to treat yourself based on how your parents treated you. And so you kind of have to take all of that, Control Alt Delete, say thank you, but we're going to move on here. And they might have beautiful, lovely qualities, and we can honor that and thank them for that, because nobody's awful, right? Like there's nothing against them, no blame, no shame, no anger, no nothing. That's part of the whole process too. But what we want to do in order to heal ourselves and reparent is to really recreate that part of ourselves. And so when you're choosing to transform this part of you, it involves really forgiving and letting go of that human parent, that human behavior, right? That we copy and repeat as a way of loving ourselves. And we insert the love of God, the unconditional love, the divine mother. And what does that look like? And understanding the archetype and of the divine mother specifically. And how do you embody that? How does that function? What does that look like? What does that balance between the masculine and the feminine parts of this energy look like? How do we take care of ourselves from this place? And you're essentially transferring your attachment bond inside from an inner parent that is like your parents to God, to the divine, to the divine mother. And in this way, I mean, it's not going to be an overnight thing. Think of any kid who maybe was in like foster care and had to like go from a parent to a foster parent. Like that's going to take time, right? Like these attachment wounds are really deep. It's going to take some time, but this process of reparenting is very much just at every moment that you catch yourself, you're just bringing awareness, you catch yourself treating yourself the same way as you were treated as a kid, feeling these feelings that you were feeling as a kid, having these thoughts running through your mind that are voices that you heard as a kid, right? Like that's your inner mother. That's based on your human parents. And when you're able to transfer that and really transform that part of you with the divine mother, you can then reparent easily. So you're kind of like healing this inner mother and reparenting your inner child, like kind of in one whole swoop, simultaneous. It's a process, where really just at every moment, I like to call it conscious evolution, because you're really, you have to be conscious of the patterns. You have to be conscious of what you're doing. You have to be conscious of your thoughts and the voices that you're hearing. You have to be conscious of what's happening. And then the evolution part is I'm choosing something different. Every single time it comes up, I'm choosing something different. So just like we discussed with healing, that like, oh, I thought I healed that part. It's going to come up again. And when it comes up again, I'm going to choose differently. And I'm going to implant this new pattern. I'm going to integrate this new belief. I'm going to reprogram my subconscious to align with the unconditional love of the divine, because you're so lovable. You're so perfect. You're so, as is, as you are. Even with sometimes these voices still coming up.
Yes. Yeah. And they always like to come up when, you because I was going to ask you what the sequence is. Like, do you do the inner child healing first, the mother wound healing first, or like the reparenting first? But, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's different for everyone. I think if you're just aware of kind of like the different angles and these different terms and what they mean, so that these are the different aspects of the process, then it kind of unfolds as it's meant to for you. So some people really have this like inner mother or inner child that won't receive love. And so like they're very blocked, very protected. And so you try and do a healing session with them and their inner child's just not having it. They kind of have to start with the inner mother. Right? Like they have to start with like, okay, let's look at that inner mother, because if your inner child's looking at your mom, this isn't going to work. So you have to kind of work with that inner mother and start to maybe do some things a little bit differently, have a different energy about you, and gain the trust of that inner child. And then you can bring in that love. Some people are able to do this even though their inner mother is still very wounded, because they're just open. Like they just don't have that much protection around it. And they're just open, and they're able to access this unconditional love and give that little baby self love in the moment. But maybe it's the day-to-day unfolding that they need some more help with. And that's where we're going to work on the inner mother, when they're integrating this and continuously coming back to that, where it's not like you have one session and you're done. You have to kind of like continuously sending love and not thinking about it, but like when it comes up, when that awareness comes up of, oh yeah, this wound is showing its face right now. My inner child needs some love, sending love. Okay, cool. But it kind of just varies depending on where you're at. And the reparenting is really just like that continuous process of making different choices day to day to really take care of yourself, to really have this part of you that's present. And this was something that I really struggled with beforehand, that really forced me to look at and work on this like self-care muscle once I became a mom. As a postpartum doula, I really knew that the self-care was really, really important for recovery, for your long-term success in parenthood. And I was really bad at it. I just didn't really do it. So there was a lot of like daily choices, daily reminders, I'm going to choose to do this right now because it's going to benefit us in the long run, even though I feel like maybe it's not the good choice in the short term, where that's where like guilt comes in of like, oh, I shouldn't be taking time for myself. Right. So there's lots of different facets that come up when you're reparenting, but that's like the day-to-day choices and actual lifestyle and state of being. So if that makes sense, it's kind of a ingredient list for the whole process.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I'm really glad that you said that it really depends on the person, because, we've all been wounded differently, and we all do things differently. We all process things differently. So, knowing that there's not like a set way to do it, and if it doesn't work this one way, it's not going to work. It's just like, okay, whatever comes up is whatever we need to do first. So that's really cool. As you were talking towards the end about self-care and mothering, I really want to talk about that, because I was not good with self-care as well. And I think that's probably a big mother wound for most women, where our mothers did not look after themselves when they had us, because we've been told that we need to put everyone else first before
Yep.
we look after ourselves. So that would explain a lot about the self-care piece. and and yeah, so do you have any tips for people, or like advice, just from your personal experience on, how people can really look after themselves after giving birth? Because I recently actually just congratulated a ex-colleague who I found out was pregnant. And I remember when I came back from mat leave, she was like really interested with, how my pregnancy went and all that. And I had postnatal depression. Um, so when I congratulated her, I'm like, just make sure you look after your mental health after, because that's something that no one seems to talk about.
Yeah.
People don't talk about the mental health piece, because most mums, they they are like, oh, I had to go through the grieving process of losing my career. And so, yeah, what kind of advice do you have for people after birth to just really just look after themselves and making sure that they're okay, and that is okay for that to happen? Yeah.
I think it's really important for everybody to be aware that societal quote unquote norm or pressure or expectation or whatever you want to call it is really not natural. It's really not actually normal. That's not part of the divine mother. If you look at the mother archetype, that is not it. That is the complete opposite. And so this is kind of where that wounding is also, it's a huge wound, part of that patriarchy, that kind of root of this whole whole misunderstanding of what the mother actually is. And to understand that the mother cannot take care of anybody else unless she is taken care of. Period. So if you think about everybody, in who's adults now and dealing with these wounds, they are wounds from a mother who was told that everyone else comes first, run yourself ragged to the death. Your kids come first. And now we're like, well, what? How does that work? Like, I still didn't feel the love because she didn't actually have any to give, right? I was, taken care of. I survived, like all of these things, but like that connection, that love, that really outpouring and overflowing that the divine mother was not there. And so now we have these wounds as a result, and we're unable to take care of ourselves because of these expectations and wounds that are just like a pandemic, really. And there's just this like total complete misunderstanding, and that's absolutely false. Like that's where like society and the capitalistic sort of mindset of things kind of intervenes and causes these things where they want to separate, like they benefit from separateness, right? Like when you're separate, you need more help, you need more things. And when we're together, we don't need as much. And there's a lot of power there. So, as a postpartum doula, I kind of took that role on because I live in an area that doesn't have a lot of family around people. Usually people come here and away from their families for their job. And so then they don't have that support system. So there's a lot of postpartum support in this area. But really, I think knowing that whatever it is that you need is absolutely valid. It is deserved. It is a need. It is not a luxury. It is a need. I think transferring that sort of mindset is really important. I moved across the country away from my son's father because I knew this was a need. Support was a absolute survival need. You can't do anything without it. And even if you have like the physical support, that's where it get like, if you're not fully supported in all the ways, and not just by your partner. Like it takes more. Your partner can't take on everything either. You have to like really have a good support system around you on all different levels, in many different ways. And without that, something's got to give. And that's going to be you. That's going to be your mental health. That's going to be your ability to be there and present with your kid, to be overflowing with love and support and connection for that child. It's going to be, their needs might be met and you're going to be surviving and whatnot, but that's not that's not the divine mother. That's not what life is about. That's not what that kid needs. Yes, they need that. And they need the rest too. And it's absolutely acceptable to have that, to ask for help, to, find a meal train, to, have somebody come and take care of all the things that you can just sit and be with your baby, like taking your recovery seriously and really doing your best to rest and just be with your kid for 40 days after birth will absolutely transform your whole parenting world. The first 40 days are a reflection of the next 40 years. And wow. if you're in those first 40 days, not prioritizing yourself, not prioritizing your healing, not prioritizing your body, your needs, your presence with your kid, your connection and bond with that child, and really building that attunement ability with them, you can see how the next 40 years of their life and yours are going to be impacted. And so really, really asking for support. It's absolutely normal. Your hormones just went like on an insane, like once in a lifetime sort of experience, and not once in a lifetime, just as many times as you have kids, but you know what I mean? Like that's the only time your hormones are going to experience this sort of roller coaster ride. And it is absolutely normal to have some emotional struggles after, some mental struggles after. I mean, you just went on this amazing roller coaster ride. Your body went through a marathon. Your heart was burst wide open. Afterwards, your sleep just like totally vanished, and without sleep, how do you function? Right. Like, so all of these things kind of take into account. It's not this like, oh, I popped a baby out, I'm going to get back to life, and in a few weeks, I'm going to go back to work. That is literally the root of all of my problems, is that my mom did that 100%. That's my own personal experience, my own wounding, and how I experienced that as a child at 6 weeks old. It's not, that was 40 days, but
yeah. There's so much gold, so much wisdom in what you've just said. And I love that you talked about us, being together is power and being separate is not. I mean, we've seen all that happening recently, but, just from this point of view of, like what they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It really does, because we need all the support you can get, and just, so important to ask for help and just be looked after. We have this, when I had my first one, it was like, you feel guilty if you don't look after your child, and I think for me, there was also this, like, don't take my child away. It's like the people, like my parents would come over, my mother-in-law would come over, and I know they were being helpful, but I think the mama bear was like, don't take my child away. Stop taking my child away.
And to that point, I want to touch on that, because there's a balance here. And I know a lot of people say, well, if I'm asking for support, that means that then I'm that's the result, that somebody's going to take my child, for you to nap or shower or just be hands-free for, whatever, for a moment. But that's not necessarily it. Honestly, a lot of the time, as a postpartum doula, a lot of the time parents did actually want me to hold their baby so that they could go and shower and nap. That was a lot, but that is not oftentimes what they actually need. Usually that was because their partners went back to work and they like needed a moment to like reset, which is valid. However, what moms truly need most of the time is for somebody to be with them, to be in tune with them the way that they're in tune with this baby, to be supporting them and asking them how they are and how they're doing, to be just present and give them a connection to the adult world, to do the laundry and the dishes and the cooking and the cleaning, right? Like those things, if you can do anything, don't ask to come over. Like if you're just a person out there listening and you have a friend who just had a baby, do not ask to come over and see baby. That is the worst thing you could do. Ask them what you can make them for a meal and go and just drop it on their door and walk away. They will let you know when they're ready for guests. Mama Bear does not want anybody coming in to take her baby. Now, once you get past a certain stage, it is like normal for you to sort of separate a little bit, for somebody to take baby for a little while so you can do something else. Like that is after the first 40 days. Nobody should be taking baby for the first 40 days other than the partner, like in those really in the close-knit circle, so mom can shower and take care of her physical needs, right? Or get a moment alone. But beyond that, it is still very much a process. Like you're saying, like, don't take my baby. And I experienced this too for a long time. Like that whole first year when I was up here working, I'm in my own space in the house, and he's with my parents playing, having fun, doing whatever and bonding with them. I had to deal with that feeling of guilt that I should be with my baby. There's this separation, and you have to kind of like release a little bit and allow yourself to separate just a little bit at a time. And I think taking that process very gradually and gracefully and compassionately to say, it's a little bit at a time and it's okay. Baby's safe. I'm safe. This is a need and a priority to do what I'm doing, is a part of that process where you don't want somebody to come in and say, here, you need a nap. Let me take your baby. Whoa, trauma. Hello, don't do that. Yeah. But when the time is right, and it is time, that doesn't mean it's not going to be hard and painful, especially for a mom who's still breastfeeding, still very attuned to that baby's needs, still very connected. And now she needs to sort of like take like a half a step away from each other for a short amount of time. It's a process. Allow the process to happen. It's very different for moms who have to go back to work and all of a sudden you're taking a huge, giant leap where now somebody else is going to take care of that baby for the whole day, 5 days out of the week, and you're just away from them. That's really, really hard. That's really, really, really hard. It's natural and normal for you and baby to have some sort of reaction to that, and to really be graceful with that process of adjustment and healing, and reminding yourself that it's okay. Everybody's safe. Everybody's loved. And we have our time together, and be very intentional with that time together to reconnect and let baby know as they grow, like, hey, I know I got to work, but I still love you so much. You are so loved. You go have fun with your friends. And when you focus it like that, baby doesn't take it personally like I did when I was an infant. Oh, you don't love me. Like you don't take it personally. That it's that connection. You can still establish and maintain a connection even though you're doing these things. You can manage your own guilt and your own woundings from it, even in the midst of these things. And it's important to do so. And it's important to pay attention to that. And it's important to process that and get support through that. Because it's not actually normal and natural for our bodies to experience handing our baby over to somebody for 40 hours a week. It's just not. We want to do it. We love our careers. This is really a beautiful time to be alive and have the ability to do this stuff. But that doesn't mean that the foundational experience in our bodies is not actually in alignment with that. And so it takes a little bit of extra self-care and acknowledging that, like, hey, I can't defy nature. My body is saying that this really sucks, and it does, but we can do it. We're strong. And I'm just going to bring in some more self-care and support to get through that phase. And it's totally doable.
Thank you so much. It's such so needed what you've just, the whole conversation that we've had. And for the new mamas or mums to be, this last part is just gold, really really soak in everything that Heather said, because, for me, like I said, I was like, don't take my baby away. And there's probably a lot of trauma there that I probably need to work on as well now. But yeah, it's just so important to really look after yourself and not feel guilty and all those things, because I've, for myself, in personal experience, that was something that I didn't do, and I know a lot of people around me also didn't, because we just didn't know, and we just followed what everyone else was doing or what our mothers were doing. And so there is still a lot of wounding and trauma and all those things that needs to be worked through. So thank you so much, Heather. It's I'm just looking at the time, so I could ask you more questions, and there's been a few more pop up, but maybe we'll have another conversation. You can come back on and we'll chat some more.
I'd love to.
Yeah. But just want to ask you one more question before we wrap up. And that is, what is setting your soul on fire right now?
What is setting my soul on fire right now? I am creating a program. I'm in the middle of launching it, that is all about the Divine Mother, learning what it is, how do we cultivate it within ourselves, how do we use that to heal our inner child, what does that process of healing the inner child look like, what is all this, and how do you do it? And it's really empowering people to do a lot of this work on their own. It's really like embodying the mother in a way that, like, I don't want to get a client and keep them forever. I want to be like the mother, you mother your kid and then they're on their own. I want to empower people with those tools and the awareness. So just like we discussed that this process looks different for everybody, I'm just sharing all the parts of it. However it unfolds for you is how it unfolds for you. These are the different ways that you can go about it and different things you can do for support throughout it, different modalities that are supportive in the healing process. Sharing all of those things so people know, you can do a lot of this on your own, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve support. And what does that support look like, and where do you go? What kind of support is actually needed? And it's different for everybody. So really bringing in that aspect as well of sharing the various ways to bring in support throughout a healing process like this and a journey like this. And how much of it do you do on your own? Because we want to really be empowered in that, right? Like, you don't want every time you're on your bed crying about something, in the middle of some really stressful, sad, whatever sort of experience, you don't want to be like, oh, I got to call so-and-so, I got to book a session here, I got to do that. You just want to be like, wow, what do I need to do right now? What is that tool? And you have it and you can access it in the moment. And that's empowerment right there. So this program is really all about empowering women and showing the way to the Divine Mother and healing.
That's beautiful. It sounds like an awesome program. So all the best with the launch. And if anyone's listening right now, I mean, you've heard all the stuff that Heather's talked about in the podcast. So she knows her stuff. And yeah, her energy is beautiful. So check it out. So Heather, if people want to find out more about you, how they can work with you, more about the program, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, my website, iamhro.com, iamhro.com. That's my nickname because my name is way too common.
Is it?
And yeah, it actually is. I could not create a business name after myself. That was not a thing I could do. So okay. I have a nickname. It's HRO, and under that I can do whatever I want. And so right now we're working on the Divine Mother. We're diving into that energy, and I'm sharing it with the world. So you can find everything about it there.
Beautiful. I'll have all your details in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been amazing.
Thank you. I'm so happy to have been here and shared with you all today.